As I said, we are on the heels now of this past weekend's UFC Fight Night. Grasso versus Shevchenko 2, a.k.a. Noche UFC, even though it was not in a Spanish-speaking country. It was in Las Vegas. I believe it was at T-Mobile. But it was coinciding pretty much with Mexican Independence Day. And, yeah, it was at T-Mobile. So, with the theme, it was Noche UFC, featuring a lot of Mexican and Latin American fighters. And the main event was Alexa Grasso defending her women's flyweight title against Valentina Shevchenko in their rematch. But neither one of these women are who we are putting on the marquee this week. This week, the name on the marquee has got to be Judge Mike Bell, who this past weekend, in front of 18,000 plus at the T-Mobile Arena, scored the what round was it?
Round 5.
Round 5, a 10-8 in favor of Alexa Grasso. In doing so, a single judge with one single point, meaning instead of scoring the round 10-9, he scored a 10-8 for Grasso. So a single judge with one single point literally affected the outcome of this fight, because if he scored that round simply a 10-9 for Grasso, Valentina Shevchenko is once again and new women's flyweight champion. But because Mike Bell scored that round at 10-8, this fight ended up being a draw. And that means that Grasso retains the belt in a draw. So, Mark, what are your thoughts on Mike Bell and his decision, and what did you see in that fifth round, and do you agree or disagree with the fact that it was scored 10-8?
I mean, I certainly disagree, as I hope anyone with a brain would disagree. I'll talk about the fight first, I guess, and then I'll circle my way back to this moron. I will say for Mike Bell, he's never a guy involved with these bad scorecards. So I guess first time for everything, though, because this was a bad one. Anyway, let me do the fight first. It was a fantastic fight. It gave us everything throughout those 5 rounds, and it deserved to have a winner. Both girls left it out there. There were huge momentum swings back and forth at different times. You know, Valentina comes out. She sets the tone. She wins the first. Then in the second, you have Alexa dropping her and swarming her, but Valentina finds the takedown to kind of retake the control. Then round 3, she just continues it. You get a grappling exhibition from Valentina in that round. Round 4, razor close back and forth that should have ended up deciding the fight. And then round 5, you have this scenario where it seems like the challenger is kind of running away with it and is going to be the new champion. And then, you know, another mistake from Valentina, and the champ finds a way to shift the momentum back and take that round. I mean, it had it all. It had so many swings, and every round was clear except the 4th. You know, Valentina won 1-3. Alexa won 2-5. And the 4th was really close, and it should have decided this fight. And it could have gone either way that round. Like, I wouldn't have hated the scorecards going to Alexa. I wouldn't have hated them going to Valentina. So I guess that helps slightly, because it's not like it was 100% that Valentina was going to be champion, because that round was tough. You know, in that round, Valentina jumps out to an early lead. Alexa responds with this flurry of knees that were all legal. So many people are saying they're illegal. They were not illegal. The rules in Vegas are that if you have a hand down, it needs to be a weight-bearing hand, and it very certainly was not weight-bearing in the slightest. So they were all legal, and then she gets this big slam. But then Valentina responds again after that, and Grasso finishes with a sub-attempt. I mean, the round's all over the place, and both girls had moments. And it was really hard to call. On MMA Decisions, you can see that 12 experts to 11 had it for Grasso. It was that tight, 12 to 11. And the public was basically even on MMA Decisions too. So it was that damn close. It should have come down to that. It should have decided the fight. You would have had either the story of, you know, Alexa like on the verge of losing and Valentina making yet another mistake that lets Alexa keep her title, or you have the story of Valentina adjusting to Alexa's jab and having success in the striking again where she didn't really have it in the first fight, and showing her grappling advantage again, and retaking her title. And in this instance, it would have been the latter because, as you said, 2 of the 3 judges scored round 4 for Valentina, and she would have been champion again. But instead, we get this utter, inexplicable nonsense from Mike Bell. 10-8 in round 5 is an awful, awful, awful score. There is no defending it. As I said, it's inexplicable. The round was no more clear for Grasso than round 2 was, or than round 3 was for Shevchenko with the grappling exhibition that she had in that round. I mean, there are no grounds to score that round 10-8. Valentina was winning the round clearly for 3+ minutes prior to making the mistake. And even after she made the mistake, she was never hurt. She never ate any big shots. Yeah, there were a couple sub attempts and some good punches, but none were close to hurting her, getting her out of there or anything. There's no justifiable way to score that round of 10-8. And yet, because MMA going to find a way to MMA, that is what we got, and we are left with this bullshit instead of celebrating what was a fantastic fight from both women.
The only round that was split on the judges' scorecards was the 4th round. Rounds 1, 2, 3, and 5, all 3 judges had the same winners of those 4 rounds.
Yeah, and they were all clear.
The only other difference is that Mike Bell scored round 5 10-8 instead of 10-9. Omar, your thoughts on the fight as a whole and on the 5th?
So before we get into the scorecards, I was actually really impressed with Alexa Grasso in this performance. I know she man. I think she still had some opportunities on the ground when it came to the control and things like that. We also have to give credit really quick to Valentina as well, who apparently fought 4 rounds with a broken hand.
That's right. I didn't even say that. Yep.
Which, if you've seen recent pictures in the last couple hours, the last few hours on this Tuesday evening, you will see how jacked that finger really is. This whole thing here is effed. Like the whole thumb/palm area, absolutely jacked. So she's apparently going to be out, by the way, for at least 3 months as far as no contact is concerned. So she's not even going to start training until probably 2024 at this point. So we should probably keep that in mind when it comes to what's next for these women. But back to the fight. I was really impressed with Alexa Grasso. Her hands I've never seen her hands look that good. And she's looked, she's always been a good fighter. She's always been a very elite fighter as far as her skill set and her IQ is concerned when it comes to the fight. But her hands were on point. She was not afraid to scrap. She was getting punches in, and I think she did a lot more damage standing up this fight than she did in the last.
She knocked her down.
But even without the knockdown, there were a lot of punches that were landing clean on Valentina's face. And we don't really see very often people being able to land things like that cleanly on Valentina. And I thought Alexa Grasso did a fantastic job. It was a rough fight. It was a tough fight. Valentina is a person who's very smart in the cage and knows how to win fights. Very close ones, but she does know how to win them. And, we were getting into moments in a lot of these rounds where, Alexa made a good accounting of herself, but it was clear who won the rounds. The 4th round, like we're talking about, was the only one that I think was split up in the air. I did have that one for Grasso. A lot of people had that one for Schevchenko as well. The 5th round is crazy. It's absolutely wild. As much as I'm glad Alexa didn't lose her belt, that card is crazy. And it's hard to imagine that the reason that was a 10-8 round wasn't because the dude felt a certain way about how his card already was and decided to just make it so that, Alexa didn't lose her belt, right? Maybe he felt by the end of that fight that Alexa had actually won that fight, or at the very minimum didn't lose that fight, and decided that because his scorecard would have been one that didn't help her in that moment or didn't reflect how he felt about the fight, he made a decision to do something that did. We've heard this be, I feel like, a kind of like one of those urban legends, right? Like we've heard of this kind of behavior with judges in the past. I don't think I've ever seen it so goddamn blatant before, or at least to the point where it's the first thought that came into my mind when that scorecard went off was like, oh, he must have thought he fucked up and didn't want Alexa Grasso to lose, so he must have put just a random score on there that would mess it all up. And I think that, the 10-8 round, I think in his mind, if it was Shevchenko, he basically didn't want anything to do with making the decision on what happened in that fight.
How could that be, though? Like, that's literally his job, is just to score the fight.
I don't disagree. And to be fair, there's a little bit of tinfoil hat here going on, right? Like, we don't really fucking know. But the feeling of it, the way that that conclusion came about, the fact that nobody agrees, like there is nobody that agrees with this 10-8 round. It's difficult to think then if it's not based on the merit of the fight and what happened, then what is another explanation for why he was giving her a 10-8 round? That's the first one that comes to my mind, and it seems like I wasn't the only one who came to that conclusion.
And dude, guys, I am somebody who is an enthusiastic supporter of the loosening up of the 10-8 and the more using it a little bit more liberally than it used to be. But then we run into this kind of situation where it's just kind of like, that was not a 10-8 round. I mean, really, the takedown and ground control by Grasso, we're really talking about 2 submission attempts. She attempted a guillotine, and then she attempted a rear naked choke, or vice versa, or in reverse order, right?
It was a rear naked. And
what
then
was first?
Was the guillotine the next one? Was it a guillotine? It was rear naked first.
Okay. Then it was a guillotine.
What was late? Was it a guillotine? I guess. I can't remember now.
Because she got out of it and she scrambled and she wound up in a guillotine attempt.
Yeah, but it was a couple sub attempts. It was some solid, punches, like rain down style punches, but none of them were like big, like, oh, big one. None of them were that.
And to be fair,
she was clearly down in the round after 3.5 minutes, like clearly down. There was no way that round wasn't being scored for Valentina.
Right.
And I think the other thing is Valentina kind of had a point where she was talking about how 10-8 rounds are basically like completely destroying the fighter. And I think we've gotten past that a little bit. I don't think that I completely agree with her take. I think that was the former use of the 10-8 round was basically near-death experience in the cage.
Correct.
But at the same time, even with that tidbit in mind and not necessarily agreeing with Valentina's take, I still don't think that was a 10-8 round. I don't even think it was close to a 10-8 round.
No, I agree.
Clear.
When I heard the 47-47, my mind shot back thinking, okay, wait, what other rounds did I score for Grasso? And I was like 2 and 4. Okay, which of those could have been the 10-8? Like I didn't even consider that it was round 5 that was the 10-8. And then because I couldn't fully remember those other rounds. And then once I thought them through, I was like, wait a second, like none of these could have been 10-8. Like the fact of it being round 5 didn't even cross my mind.
Yeah.
I even went to round 2. I was like, all right, she had the knockdown in round 2. Did he give her a 10-8 because of a knockdown? Like, yeah, it made no sense.
This result makes me think of that idea that I've heard a few people mention before of, well, 2 things. A, for live scoring, even though this is at the 5th round, so it wouldn't matter.
Solved it, yeah.
And B, interviewing the judges after the fight if it's some
100%.
crazy shit like this of like, Mike Bell, what'd you see in that 5th round that made you think it was a 10-8? Microphone in his face. I don't. It wouldn't solve anything.
He would not be able to offer an explanation. Like,
have you heard about Ariel having been trying to do that for the longest time now? He's contacted Nevada Athletic State Commission. He's contacted other commissions. I think California was the other one that he also contacted about reaching out to judges to have them explain some of these scorecards or whatever, like when it happens. And he makes the point of like, I can talk to everybody. I can talk to Dana White, or I guess he probably specifically can't talk to Dana White, but reporters can talk to Dana White and they can like ask everybody involved in the process and things like that, and they can talk to anybody. But for whatever reason, the guys that are actually making the decisions on who wins and loses in these fights are all of a sudden like cast into the shadows, and no one can talk to them about it or ask their opinion. Yep. And I don't think it should be that way. And I think
what is wrong with that?
Well, so the only reason that Ariel has said that he has been given by people, I think specifically in Nevada, it sounds like California was a little bit more like, you do what you want. You can ask them what they want. I don't know if they're going to tell you anything, but I'm not going to stop you. Nevada Athletic Commission put the kibosh on it before it even got to whether the judges wanted to talk or not. They were like, no, we're not going to do that, and it's not something we plan on doing right now. And they didn't really give an explanation as to why, other than we want to protect them. They don't make a lot of money doing what they do. It was an excuse or an answer that that didn't make any sense to me. It just
That's a
sounded
joke.
like random facts that he was throwing out. So
Protect them. They have all the power. They are deciding
the state.
who gets paid, who is champion. They're deciding everything. You want to protect them? Absolutely not. Like when you have that kind of power, you have to explain yourself.
Amen. Totally. They're the state. Like no one. There's no one above them.
This is one of the most I would ever have loved to hear, which is funny because if he just scored the fourth for Grasso and she won anyway, I wouldn't have even complained.
Right.
But he
It
didn't.
would have been like,
And-
oh, that was a weird score for the fifth round, but Grasso won.
Yeah. It's like she
Totally.
would have won either way. All right. I mean, but still, like, I just there is nothing he could say. Like, there's not even a
Right.
theory I could come up with that he could spit out of his mouth to explain why he viewed that as a 10-8.
Agree.
at
And
least
it's a
not
shame,
one
too.
that's legit anyway. I'm sure he's got a reason.
Maybe he
but
could
not
have.
one that's
he
legit.
might. I can imagine that he could say something about that he thought those submission attempts were very close, and that to him was dominance and
Use your eyes then. Like, I really think Omar might have a point that, like, that fight ended and, like, pride style, he was like, man, kind of
Right.
feel like Alexa won that fight overall. Maybe I'll just give her a 10-8 so she keeps her belt.
But of course, the three judges don't see each other's scores, so the other two guys could have
But-
scored it for Shevchenko.
Oh, for sure.
He
Yeah.
could have, but then it wouldn't have been his decision, is what I'm saying. Like, the fact that he scored it a draw means that he put it on the other two judges to figure it out for them damn selves. Because I'm pretty sure
Right,
he
and
knew
if one of
that
them
they
had
weren't going to
Grasso,
score a
she
draw.
would keep the belt.
So you're saying
Right.
that that's the judging equivalent of like passing the buck?
Yeah.
Yeah, and because it now only
Maybe.
now
If
only
it's a
one-
legit draw, it's a legit draw. But do you feel like that was a legit draw by the end of the fifth round from a scoring perspective, not from a pride perspective, but from a legit round for round scoring perspective? I don't think anybody can make the argument that that was a draw on points. You can't.
If it was a pride style fight, and they were like, you know what, that fight was super close. I'm gonna fight that. I'm gonna score that fight overall as a draw. I would be like kind of okay with that. But
Do you
in
know what-
the must system, the 10-point must system, you got to score by round, and that
But you
fifth
know what's
round was
funny?
not a 10-8.
You know what's funny?
Correct.
You could have scored round 5 10-9 for Grasso and round 4 10-10. But no one ever scores 10-10s. But round 4 was
No
that
one.
close that it could have been a draw that
Round
way.
4 was super close,
Which would have been way
No
more of
one-
a respectable draw than this way.
yes.
No one will ever score a fight 10-10.
No,
ever.
no one
And I'll
uses
tell you
10.
and I'll tell you why. If you watch the Rose and Carlos Esparza fight,
I
if
was
you
just
didn't
gonna say
score that fight,
Yeah.
that first round, or probably even more than that first round, a 10-10,
Yep.
you're never scoring another fight 10-10 for the rest of your life.
Yeah, we
that
don't
was
get
the standard, and no one did it. Not one.
Yep.
It's to echo a point Omar made. It's a damn shame because this was a great fight, man. It was a great championship fight between two of the best fighters in the world. You know?
Oh yeah. oh yeah.
Connection issues over here. You guys still hear me fine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well,
I'm off the stand.
let's talk about where these ladies go from here. Run it back. A lot of people were saying, does it make sense? Yes? No? Mark, what do you think?
Run it back. I don't care. I don't care that it's going to hold up the division. Yes, it sucks, but there's no other choice here. And I get it. There's this curveball now of Valentina being hurt. It does seem like she could be back to training in like maybe not even 3 months. So, I don't know how soon Grasso's looking to get back in there. If it is going to fuck things up because Valentina's hurt, then maybe you don't have a choice. But if it works out where you can schedule this thing, you got to do it. And it does help that you have two contenders waiting in Erin Blanchfield and Manon Fior, because now they can just fight each other. It's not like you're leaving one person out in the cold, Like, if it's me, I put all four of them on the same card. But put
Hell yeah.
Blanchfield and Fior on the same card. Now you have a backup built in if Shevchenko drops out or Grasso drops out for any reason, and you straighten out the whole division on the same night.
Omar, what do you think?
So I'm also kind of on the rematch train. I just don't know how that's going to look from a timing perspective just because of Valentina's injury. I don't know how much of it is up to Grasso, to be honest. I think she does have a pretty good following when it comes to the Latin American crowd, especially the Mexican crowd. And Valentina, to be honest, has never been a particularly big sell, which is why a lot of her fights have either been fight nights or they've been, co-headlining a really big event or something like that. But she's never, to my understanding, I don't think she's ever carried a pay-per-view on her back before. And I don't think she brings in that kind of spark, I guess. So from a business perspective, I don't know really what that looks like. Maybe they're going to want to throw Grasso in there with somebody else that makes sense. I think, Mark, you were saying were you trying to put Aaron Blanchfield and Fior together and see what happens?
Yeah, I said I'd put all four of them on the same card. That way they're on the card already if Grasso or Shevchenko fell off, so one of them would be able to step in. But yeah, I'd book both fights on the same card.
So just considering the time frame, let's say we don't put Valentina. Let's say Valentina's out. I would say minimum spring of 2024, right? Just considering the fact that she has to heal, she has to get surgery. I don't know if I mentioned that. So she does have to get surgery on her hand. That was confirmed.
Do you listen when I speak?
Oh, I didn't hear what you said. My bad. So,
just say no.
Yeah, I didn't hear. I wasn't listening.
I talked about the surgery, the recovery timeline.
Yeah. So basically what I'm getting at is instead of putting all four of them, I would imagine that you should probably, in my opinion, I would just put Fior and Blanchfield first and sooner. That way we have an actual number one contender.
How soon could they fight though? Like
they didn't really take a lot of damage in their last. I would imagine so. Maybe even January though. I mean they.
But then when's a title fight happening?
I mean, I would do it at the beginning of the spring. And if Valentina's ready, then give her the rematch. If she's not ready, then have Alexa fight the next person.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Because I was going to say, wouldn't Valentina be ready by then? But you're just saying sort out the other one first in case. Yeah, all right. That's right. Fair. I can see that. I can see that.
We went in a roundabout way there, but we got there.
Yeah.
We got there.
Yes, I get that.
Okay. I mean, what else is there to discuss about this fight? It sucks when either a judge or a ref kind of steals the spotlight. I don't think Mike Bell was trying to steal the spotlight. I mean, to your point, Omar, it's like he was trying to pass the buck and he didn't want it to be his thing, but it was, like I said at the beginning of this, literally 1 point determined the outcome of this fight, man, and that sucks. It just does, because it's so crazy that on the one hand, if I didn't see the fight and I was like, guys, I'm busy, I can't watch the fights, but just tell me the results and give me the gist of the fight. And if you told me like it was a great fight, it was back and forth, Shevchenko got dropped in the 5th round, she got put in a couple of what looked like tight submissions, but overall, like, she won her rounds as well. It was a great back and forth fight, ended in a draw. I'd be like, oh my God, that's so crazy. So I'm not super upset that it ended in a draw. I am super upset that it was determined through this avenue.
I agree.
Right. Yep. I agree as well.
Yeah.
Because it was a great fucking fight, man. I love these two fighters so much, dude. So much. I was so impressed by Grasso, dude. You're right. I mean, I feel like she's improved. And then she clearly came into this fight with so much more, even more confidence, I feel. Her stand-up looked incredible. And the last time somebody stood toe-to-toe with Shevchenko, I think, was Nunes. If I'm not mistaken. Everybody else, Shevchenko just gets the better of.
I thought Shevchenko had so much more success in the striking in this fight than in the first fight.
Really?
Yeah. I thought Grasso handled the striking in the first fight, and that Shevchenko had to resort to the grappling. Whereas here I felt like Shevchenko was doing fine everywhere.
Funny. I guess I have to go back and rewatch that first fight.
Maybe I think there was a little bit more stand-up in this fight from Shevchenko that I thought Alexa Grasso looked great in the hands. I actually thought she was getting the better of her in a lot of the exchanges, but I think there was more stand-up time in this fight than I think the ground fight. Did you see a spinning back kick in that fight? Because I don't think I did.
Why? Who got a spinning back kick?
I'm talking about Valentina, how she does her spinning back body kick.
Do it. Yeah, no, she did not. She stayed.
She didn't,
far
right?
Away from, yes, 100%.
And so that's the thing that I was talking about last week, was kind of having to adapt to it, right? But she's changing up. She's forcing Alexa Grasso is forcing Shevchenko to change her tools. Shevchenko has thrown that spinning back kick to the body in every fight that girl has been in that I can remember. And this is the first time I have never seen her throw that kick. And it goes to show you that she knows Alexa Grasso is not the one to fuck with. And it was a great fight. I loved every minute of it.
It's just crazy. See, we're not talking about some of the fight stuff because we're so focused on the scorecard. But how crazy is it that last fight she made this mistake and got her back taken and choked out? And this fight, when she was on her way to winning round 5 in the title, she made another mistake and got her back taken. Didn't get choked out here, but like almost the same shit in a different way. But like, that's the danger of that head and arm throw. And you always see it in women's MMA. They love the head and arm throw, but that's the risk of it. Yeah. It can go south.
Dude, that happened in that 5th round. You're right. Like, she went for the head and arm, and she got taken down and all right into a submission, basically. And I was like, God, does Alexa Grasso just have Shevchenko's number, man?
Yep.
Shevchenko was definitely salty at the end of that fight. I don't think we need to blame Mexican Independence Day for
she wasn't blaming the holiday. She was blaming like the hometown advantage, basically.
I mean,
the vibe.
But she was, it was the day and the night and the vibe and Mexican UFC basically. And she was like, I wasn't feeling that. And I was like, I don't know if it's all that. It was one douchebag that just like had the scorecards all fucked up. Like it wasn't all that.
It's as though she was, it was like this was an away game for her. Is almost the sense that she had, and the refs were like skewed?
Yeah.
Slanted?
Swayed?
But you're right, dude. That was some Himalayan sea salt right there in that interview. She came right out. She said the quiet part out loud. Okay, in the interest of time, let us move on to the co-main event of Noche UFC. This past weekend at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. In the welterweight division, a bout of consequence, and Della Maddalena defeated Kevin Holland by a split decision. The scores read 29-28, two 29-28s for Della Maddalena, and 129-28 for Kevin Trailblazer Holland. Omar, let's start with you this time. What were your thoughts on this fight with Della Maddalena locking horns with Kevin Holland? Kevin Holland seemingly bringing in that jovialness into the cage that we are kind of used to with him. He came up short this time. What are your thoughts?
So this fight basically went exactly the way I thought it was going to go. This was a very tough fight, a very difficult fight for both guys to find success in. I did think Jack Della Maddalena found more success in that fight at the very minimum with the bigger shots. I think he found his right hand quite a few times when he was stepping in and was able to hit Kevin Holland clean on the chin. But it was a tough fight, man. It was definitely a tough fight, and I think it was exactly the type of test that both of them needed. I know Kevin Holland was disappointed in the decision. I don't necessarily disagree with the decision. The problem is the second round was a pain in the ass. It was a toss-up fight when it came down to that second round. I did have Jack winning, but I mean, you could tell me that Kevin Holland won that second round, and I wouldn't necessarily have to have much to argue in that sense. It's just, like I said, I thought Jack did more damage overall. I thought he had cleaner shots and bigger shots in there, and for me, that was the deciding factor.
Mark?
That's funny. I felt like the second round was the clearest round of the whole fight for Kevin Holland. I was hung up on the first round. Interesting, but similar vibes though overall, despite the round differences. This was a really close fight. I thought it was kind of a disappointing fight. Not that there wasn't talent on display, because there was, but I think going in there was definitely a higher expectation of violence than what we ended up getting with what these two guys are capable of. They did a little bit of a dance, And I think it's really because they both kind of nullified each other in different ways, which is what made it such a close fight. Like, Jack didn't want to fully commit to his normal, like, walk him down style as dramatically as he usually does on Holland, because Holland is so long and he was being so active. He was throwing a million strikes. And then on the flip side, Holland, he fought a bit of a tentative fight because of the power that was coming back at him. Like, he looked like he didn't really want to fully commit to big strikes. He was flicking a lot of them. He was looking to stay safe and kind of try to stay on the outside and score without putting his head in range of the nukes that we know JDM has. So I think those two things kind of combined to give us a fight where neither guy was able to like clearly pull away. Personally, yeah, as I said, I thought Holland clearly won the second round. I think Jack won the third round. For me, it was the first round that was up in the air. I couldn't decide who won it live. I watched it twice more. Once I edged it to Holland. The next time I edged it to Jack by like this much. So it's really that close for me. Split had to go somebody's way. On this night, it went Jack's, which is fine with me. As I said, I thought Holland fought a little too tentative. He could have gone more, and maybe it would have got him hurt. Who knows? But I think he could have pushed it a little more and maybe not been as upset as he is.
So I have two thoughts. Number one is that I'm a huge Kevin Holland fan. I think he is a bright spot in the UFC. He's a bright spot in the sport overall. He has a big personality, and he has the talent to match. I'm always left, not always, because sometimes he wins in spectacular fashion. But in cases like this, I'm left a little, I don't want to say disappointed, because I don't think I'm in the place to be disappointed, because I'm not like a fighter or a coach, but I just mean like I'm like a little let down. I'm like I want a little more nasty from Kevin Holland in the fight.
Yeah, that's what he needs.
This like jovial, fun thing that he does is fun, because it's like a completely different flavor than what we usually get as MMA fans watching two people fight. He's like so comfortable in there. He's like chit-chat, like literally chit-chatting.
Did you hear what Jack said he was saying?
No.
Yeah, what did he say?
He said that he was telling him how much fun he was having in the fight, and that they should definitely train together after the fight.
That sounds about right.
That's such a strange thing. And basically that's what Jack said. He was like, yeah, like it was weird. It kind of made me feel weird about like continuing to fight him because he was so nice.
Like, do you think it's like a psychological trick that he's using, or he's just...
I don't know, man.
I think that's him, dude. That seems like a real personality thing. Like, I think that's just him.
Yeah, I think he's just Kevin Holland. But I agree, it's so frustrating because, like, again, if he was a little more aggressive, maybe he does get knocked out. Who knows how it goes?
Sure.
But also, if he was a little more aggressive, maybe he wins that fight, and that's a big fucking win. And he would have been in line for like a top 5 welterweight maybe off of that win. Like that would have he would have been in a big spot. So I get it. It is kind of it's a little hard to be a Kevin Holland fan at times. We saw it with Wonder Boy. Like
I was just gonna say that. Think of our frustration against Wonder Boy. He like refused to grapple the greatest kickboxer that the UFC has like ever seen.
Yep. Yep.
And he has such great attributes for welterweight. Like, just use him. Like, just fucking turn it up, man.
Yeah.
I only say this out of frustration because I love Kevin Holland, and I'm a big fan of his.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how in MMA sometimes we get these fights where it's almost like they didn't happen. Like, I feel like Jack looks no different than he did prior to that fight. And Holland maybe looks like slightly different, but like I feel like Jack won and like didn't really get anything from winning.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a great fight though.
Because if Kevin Holland had engaged more, but he did.
He threw a lot. He threw a ton of strikes, but like so many of them were like flicky little, he just, as I said, I guess he didn't want to get in phone booth range and risk it, but yeah, it cost him.
I'm reminded a little bit. It's a similar feeling that I have, I think, to sometimes watching the Diaz brothers fights, in that like it's just a little too much taunting guys and not enough engaging, and it's like it's almost in fights that they have lost on the scorecards. It almost was like they're taking a moral victory home with them. Like, oh, I clowned on this guy, and I pointed and laughed at him, or I slapped him a couple times. But, like, against Carlos Condon, against GSP, or against Anderson, like Nick Diaz, like, literally laid down on the mat. It's, like, too much, man. Too much taunting. It's frustrating because he's so effing talented.
Yep.
Anyway, I'm going to run into him one day. He's going to smack me, so... Let's talk about the winner here, Mr. Jack Della Maddalena. He does get the win. It goes in the books for him as a victory. So, Omar, looking out at the landscape of the welterweight division, who do you see as could be a good next opponent for JDM?
Yeah, so Jack right now is number 12 in the division. He moved up a couple spots from last week. It's hard not to say that this man doesn't deserve like increase in talent, right? Like I think we just need to keep testing Jack and keep moving him up the rankings until we figure out what his ceiling is, if at all, because he looks great. Ian Gary Machado is right on, they're pretty much neck and neck when it comes to their rankings and their momentum in the division. I'm not super keen on them fighting at this particular minute, but I wouldn't be surprised if somehow that went in that direction. But if I had to give something to Jack, let me just look up real quick and just make sure this Chooch doesn't have a fight. And if he does, maybe it'll be the winner or the loser. So I think Luque would be an interesting fight for Jack Della Maddalena. I'd be down for that.
Mark?
Yeah. To me, there's one guy that very clearly makes the most sense, and that is Vicente Luque. Jack has won his last 2 fights, but he hasn't really set the world on fire in either of them. I don't think he should necessarily be fighting like the true tippity top just yet, and I think Luque is that perfect interim level type of fight. He's going to bring it. He's well rounded, just like JDM. He's a knockout threat, just like JDM. That's where I go. I think it's a great litmus test of how good Jack is.
Huge litmus test, man, because Luque is a legit talent, man. He's a legit top 10 talent, and that fight would just be fireworks, man. Like, don't blink. Probably somebody's going to go to sleep in that fight. Okay. What about Kevin Holland? I hope is staying at welterweight. What do you think, Mark?
I hope so, too. He's throwing out Magny. I feel like people are just kind of accepting his call out and saying he should fight Magny. I don't love that. I think he's kind of past Magny, at least for this moment. Not saying they could end up, if he loses again, Magny wins again. But Magny looked really bad against Ian Gary. He got worked. And Kevin Holland had looked very good coming into this fight. He barely lost this fight. I'd prefer to see maybe like a Sean Brady. I know Magny's still like ranked fairly high, but I just feel like he's on the way down a bit, and I'd rather someone who's a little bit more of a contender. So I'm going to say Sean Brady and let him or Holland kind of start a new run.
For clarity, Kevin Holland is ranked number 13 right now in the official UFC rankings, and Neil Magny's ranked 14. So from a ranking perspective, I don't know how much sense that really makes for Kevin Holland at this point. Like you said, that the loss wasn't like a Neil Magny loss, where I don't think he deserves to be fighting somebody above him. I think he deserves to be fighting somebody below. So for Kevin Holland, I do think somebody just slightly above might make sense. Sean Brady's high, but I feel like he's also been out for quite some time, that I think he probably needs to defend that spot.
Okay. Let's move on, because it's already 11 o'clock. We have quite a bit more show ahead of us. Yes. All right. In the women's strawweight division. Oh, yeah, we're skipping down to the feature bout on the prelims. Lupita Godinez defeats Elise Reed by submission via rear naked choke in the second round. Mark, go first. You guys give us your take.
Lupita Godinez came in there to scrap. Now, it may have had something to do with the opponent and the advantages that she believed she had. I did say I expected Lupita to be able to bully Reed in there. But, man, you still want to say you'd love to see Lupita fight like that in every fight. And I think she can. Sometimes, I was saying this last week, sometimes she gets almost like too set in like, I'm going to strike this fight, or too set in I'm going to wrestle this fight. And this was not that. This was a perfect blend, constant pressure, trying to press her advantages in any way she could. And it ended up probably being the best performance that we've seen from her thus far. And she dominated Elise Reed. I mean, she dropped her in the first, bad with a left. She picked her up. She threw her around the cage. She almost caught her in an arm bar. And then Reed's reward for surviving that was just getting battered some more in the second round. Ate another barrage of strikes, got slammed again, and then ultimately choked out. So, yeah, dominant statement performance from Lupita Godinez.
Omar, what do you think?
It's the best Lupe Godinez I've ever seen by
Hell
a mile.
yeah, man.
I'm pretty sure she either like rock bottomed Elise Reed or like did a DC slam on her or something wild. Like she picked that girl all the way up in the air and then slammed her on her ass. Like that was I don't even know Lupe was that strong, dog. Like that is crazy. Her striking was super super crisp. I don't remember her hands being that crisp. I definitely think there's something. It's apparently her and Alexa Grasso are like girls. So maybe they're training together now, and maybe that's where whatever's going on in that camp. Maybe that's where her hands are getting sharper because the difference in the way that her hands were letting loose this past weekend was night and day difference as far as I'm concerned in her last fight. The blend between the striking and the wrestling was great. But man, that striking was on point. She was lighting her up, man. It was a beautiful performance from Lupe, and like I said, it's hard for me to want to pick against her at all going forward because that performance was absolutely the best thing I've ever seen out of her.
Staying with you, Omar, given the fact that this was the best performance you've ever seen from her, what do you think could be next for her at women's strawweight?
Women's strawweight is kind of is very active right now. We've got Michelle Waterson-Gomez fighting this weekend against Marina Rodriguez. And to be honest, man, I would kind of like to see her fight the winner of that fight.
Okay, Mark, any other thoughts? Any other ideas?
I was actually going to say the loser of that fight. I get it being the winner. I kind of feel like Marina's going to win, and I feel like that's a little bit of a big step for Lupe. So I guess that's why I was imagining loser in my head. But hey, it could be winner too. She looked that good.
I can tell you what, man, she could definitely stand with Marina Rodriguez. Off of what I saw this past weekend, her striking might be a problem from Rodriguez. That might be a very very good scrap.
Anybody you want to throw out there for a possible next opponent for Elise Reed?
Striker than Elise Reed.
Yes. No, that's not what I mean. I don't mean she's going to do the same thing to Elise Reed to Marina Rodriguez. But I do think that will be something that will be a fight she can definitely win on her feet. Like that is a competitive striking fight, I think, between the two of them. At least again, based off of what I saw this last weekend. I thought her hands were super
and she'd
super
probably
crisp.
look to wrestle in that fight too. Which is what would make her so live.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mike, we don't need to do losers. We got too much to do, man. Let's keep it moving.
You're so right. Okay, because I'm excited to talk about this one. In the middleweight division, Roman Kopylov gets his fourth straight finish, knocking out Josh Fremd in the second round, official time 4:44. Mark, talk about it.
This fight gave us one of many examples of what can make fighting so great, which is that if you're watching this fight like with an untrained eye in round one, you're probably like, wow, these guys are pretty evenly matched. Like this Josh Fremd guy is hanging right with this Roman Kopylov guy in the striking. And he was. But because we know, you could tell in every exchange the way Kopylov was settling in. You could tell the way he was making his reads, the way he was starting to set things up. And then by the last minute, you really started to see it. He was starting to time his shots. Fremd was getting clipped on counters. Then he obviously got his nose smushed with a spinning back fist right at the end of the round. And then round two, it was Kopylov completely comfortable. All Kopylov in that round. And it just became a matter of time. And credit to him because he really took his time. He didn't rush it. He fought smart. He waited until he found the big shot, and he found it to the body. Just a perfect left to the liver, off switch, fight over. Super impressive from Roman Kopylov. And the KO run continues. 4 fights.
Yeah. This is a guy who lost his first 2 UFC fights. He went 0-2 in the UFC. His first fight in the UFC, he got submitted by Carl Roberson.
Which is mind-blowing, watching him today.
Yeah. And he's back to his winning and finishing ways. The only fight that he's won ever that went to the scorecards was his very first pro fight. Every single of the next 11 wins of his career have been by knockout. Omar, talk about it.
I think a couple of things that I took away from that fight. These are big dudes, man. And the pace that Kopylov has throwing strikes is kind of crazy, right? He's not a I wouldn't compare him to a pressure fighter like Sean Strickland, for example, right? It's not like Kopylov walks people down, but the volume of his strikes and the timing of his strikes doesn't really allow for people to adjust very well in the moment, right? The moment he resets and the moment some guy probably thinks he's got a second or two, there's a kick coming, there's a punch coming, there's, you know what I mean? There's always something that he's doing, but he's not doing like a Colby Covington thing or you know, where they're coming forward with multiple shots, moving forward with pressure and just kind of using an excessive amount of volume with not a ton of power behind it. Kopylov has a perfect sort of grasp on the timing, on the use of power, on the pace. And I think he's really got a real pinpoint on the rhythm during the fight. And I think that's where his control comes from, at least with the guys that he's fought so far. Who knows how much his approach is going to work with guys who are not going to give him that opportunity, right? Who are going to fight against him trying to dictate the rhythm and the pace. But for right now, these guys who he has been fighting, he's been able to do that. And at the higher weight class, I think he just moves a little bit faster than a lot of these guys can react to. I can tell you from experience watching a lot of the higher level guys that are in my gym, there is a flow that a lot of them tend to have just from pad work and holding and things like that. And it just seemed like that's what Kopylov had, right? Like he just didn't have to think about what was next. Wherever his body was at the end of whatever strike, that was where he was, and that's where he was going to throw his next strike. And he flowed, and he just kind of kept moving. Was never really off base. It was a beautiful performance. Like I really love watching the kid's technique. He's really, really fun to watch. I was actually kind of surprised to realize how far away from the top 15 he is with the amount of talent I think he has. So it'll be interesting to see where Mark has him in the rankings, and I'm assuming where he's moved up to.
It's a little sad that he was supposed to face Anthony Hernandez as a replacement, but then Hernandez dropped out. And to that point, Hernandez is number 15 in the UFC's rankings.
Okay.
So that could have been
that would have been a huge opportunity for Kopylov.
Really would have catapulted him for sure.
But yeah, he's low for me. He's 41. He's
got to prove it.
You know, he hasn't beaten anyone really yet. I guess his best win is the Kiriko. It's De Kiriko, then Puna Soriano, Fremd, Claudio Ribeiro, and he lost to Duraev, which is okay, and he lost to Carl Roberson. So, like, the resume doesn't really dictate it just yet, but the talent, you know, and we're about to match the guy up, but, like, we're kind of here now where maybe we go up the line a little bit, and if we see another knockout, then it's kind of like, all right, we're going to have to do something here.
Yeah. Man, that Anthony Hernandez fight would have been fucking dynamite. Mark, staying with you here, go right into that point. Who do you think could be a great sweet spot matchup for Kopylov next?
Yeah, so as mentioned, I'm not going to go hugely up. I am going to take the winner of the upcoming Joe Pyfer and Abdul Razak Al Hassan fight, and I will pair that man with Kopylov. Those are all knockout artists. Probably get a banger, and then if he can beat one of those dudes, then I think he's on his way.
Omar.
Mine was a little bit different, though time frame seems relatively similar. I was actually going to go with the loser of the Bruno Silva Sharubutin Magomedov fight.
Okay. How about one Israel Adesanya?
Right, you're out of control. You're out of control.
I feel like middleweight, as I'm looking at the top 15
I thought you were
right
about
now.
to say you feel like that'd be a good fight. I
feel like
wrap it up.
I don't know. And middleweight is having one of these moments right now where a somewhat long-standing champ, you know, gets taken off the throne, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, this division is like it's deep all of a sudden. It's kind of a murderer's row.
A good amount of interesting guys who have kind of popped up. Like obviously we have plenty of names of guys who have been there for a minute: the Stricklands, Vittoris, Cannonier, so on and so on.
Right.
Like Duplessis obviously has burst onto the scene, but even beyond that, like Roman Dolidze is a factor now. Brendan Allen is looking fantastic. This dude Alaskarov that debuted recently is only 1-0, but he looked great. Fluffy Hernandez, who we just said, Kopylov, Petrovsky's working his way up. Like there's a lot of names of guys who are really kind of coming up. And Kyle Bohalio has looked awesome. He's undefeated so far. Like I could probably go on. There's interesting middleweights coming up.
Yeah, I feel like that has not always been the case in the middleweight division.
Yeah, I agree.
It has been there have been eras where the middleweight has been somewhat weaker than your lightweight and welterweight and featherweight, bantamweight.
for sure.
Okay, let's move on.
All right, let's keep moving.
Yeah, one more fight to sort of dissect a little bit before we jump into the lightning round. Okay, here we go. In the women's flyweight division. Wait, flyweight?
Yes, flyweight.
Yes, women's flyweight division. Tracy Cortez takes home the W, defeating Jasmine. They were saying their name different again. Jasudavicius. God damn it.
Jasudavicius, I think.
Jasudavicius. I don't know.
Or is
It's a tough one.
Jasudavicius?
It's a tough one,
I
man.
think it
Mark,
was.
just start talking.
Dude, Tracy Cortez looked so improved. We were talking about Lupi's hands improving. How about Tracy Cortez's fucking hands? She was so much faster, which I expected. I thought it would be a key, and it was. But I never expected that level of crispiness from the hands. I mean, she was piecing Jasmine up in round one. But it's not huge power from Tracy, and because of that, as much as she was getting touched, Jasmine wasn't afraid to keep walking forward, and it did pay off in round two. She kind of swung it back toward her. Then she was able to get the takedown, change the fight with that. I'm not sure if she won round two, but it was certainly her best round. But then it didn't matter because she did lose round three. They scored it right. Tracy certainly won 1 and 3.
Yeah,
and it was a scrap for sure. Jasmine didn't go away. She was in it, but Tracy outstruck her in round 3, and she did what she had to do to make sure the decision went her way. It was a really nice return to the octagon for her after being out for a long time, and she's another one now who'll probably get a pretty interesting opponent here.
Watching live, I thought the fight was pretty competitive and pretty close, and I was a little surprised to see 30-27 on 2 scorecards, but I do think overall the UD for Cortez was the right way to go. Omar, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought she looked great. First of all, I gotta always shout her out for walking out to Salinas, because that's real right there. I love that woman. Gonna make me go watch that movie, man. Anyway, Tracy Cortez got a lot of love from that Mexican crowd too. I don't know if you guys were paying attention to that moment, but there wasn't really anybody in the stands. Like, it was the prelims.
Yep.
Stands are pretty empty in the U.S. It's not a lot of these other countries. They're there from minute one, but in the U.S., for the most part, you see people trickle in little by little as the fights progress.
Right.
And that stadium was relatively empty when Tracy Cortez walked out. And if you had your eyes closed, you would not have been able to tell the difference, because
That's right.
They were shouting for her. They were cheering for her. I thought it was a real miss for her to not have been on the main card. I'm not really sure where the decision making was there. But if she's not on the main card in her next fight, I think that's a real missed opportunity. Just as an aside.
I agree. I thought it was strange that she wasn't on the main card. I didn't really get that.
Yeah. As far as her hands are concerned, man, her hands were looking absolutely great. She was landing those right hands on point. If there was any kind of criticism I would have in her striking, it would just be to keep her hands up. For every punch that she was landing on Jasudavicius, the left side of her face was swollen by the time that fight was over, because Tracy got hit tons of time in the same spot, and it was just because her hands weren't up. They were just kind of off to the side here. They weren't coming up to defend herself. She was just allowing her left side to get hit and just leave it open. So I think there are things to work on in the striking department, obviously, but man, she looked absolutely fantastic for such a long layoff, a game opponent, and obviously a big spot for her from a crowd perspective, right? Like, she didn't return to the apex, is my point, right? It wasn't a quiet apex where she can come and just chill and it's just another fight. People were there. The pressure was there. People were watching her. People were rooting her on. I think this was a big deal for Tracy Cortez, and I'm glad she walked away with the victory.
Yeah, I hope the promotion kind of takes note to the fact, just as you said, like even on the prelims when the T-Mobile was not at capacity yet, the crowd that was there was going apeshit for Tracy Cortez, and the girl is a star.
Yeah,
I mean, she improves now to 11-1. She hasn't lost a fight since her pro debut. So after losing her pro debut, she's now on an 11-fight win streak. She's now undefeated in the UFC. She's 5-0 in the UFC. She just, like you said, she beat a very talented opponent in Jasmine, whose last name I'm not going to butcher again to pay respects to her. I think it's fueled in part by Tracy Cortez's beauty, which is immense. She might be she's like the Latina Paige VanZant, but I think she's even more attractive than Paige VanZant. She's gorgeous.
I think she's also a better fighter than Paige Van Zandt, personally.
And that's the second part of the point is that like she, and the record shows it too. I mean, she's 11-1, and now she's undefeated in the UFC thus far, and she's talent, beauty. She's like a total package, and it shows. And she's a star, and I think that the UFC is going to take note of the reaction that she got, the pop that she got from the crowd, and she should be a main card fighter going forward. That being said, as I said, 5-0 now in the UFC. Mark, give me her next possible opponent.
Yeah, I think it's time for her to fight a name. I get her, she had been out for a minute. I think Jasmine made perfect sense, but I think off of that win, she should be fighting a name. So I'm going to say the winner of the upcoming fight between Jennifer Maia and Viviane Araújo. It could even be the loser of that fight, theoretically, but, both of those girls are a name in the division, and that's where Tracy's got to be at this point.
Omar,
that was actually that was actually what I had as well. I think it's really going to depend on how that fight ends, how that fight finishes, right? Because if somebody's injured or somebody can't kind of make a relatively good turnaround, then it might just end up going to one or the other just based on availability. But I do think that is the direction she needs to go, and that's the fight that it should work off of.
Okay, let us now hop into our lightning round. Here we go.
Super lightning. Come on, we can do
Super lightning. Literally, please, God, Jesus. Give me your quickest takes. Here we go. On the main card, in the bantamweight division, Raul Rosas Jr., the UFC's youngest fighter, gets another win this time over Terrence Mitchell, TKOing him in the first round, under a minute, the official time. 54 seconds of round number 1. Mark, go first.
Can I do this faster than he won? It happened quick. He showed off his hands this time, landed a huge left on Mitchell to put him down. He was all over him to his credit, didn't let him recover, and gets a huge bounce-back win. So well done for him on a big stage.
Omar.
Yeah, I think that Rosas has been working with a boxing coach, a pretty famous one on Instagram that puts on stuff all the time. It's Flamin' Mitts, I believe is his name or something like that. But his hands look great, man. His wrestling looked pretty good too, but his hands were really the talk of the town for that night. Like, shut Terrence off and bowling pinned him, just completely starched him and watched him drop on the floor. Great performance from Rosas, and definitely the momentum he needs in the UFC.
All right, in a scrap in the lightweight division, Daniel Zellhuber gets it done over Christos Giagos by submission via anaconda choke in the second round. Omar, go.
Dude, Zellhuber is a scary, scary individual. The man is extremely big. He looks like a giant in that octagon. On top of the fact that his striking is on point, and he apparently also has a very good ground game as well, I would be very concerned about having to fight Daniel Zellhuber.
Mark.
Yeah, I agree. And this was a good little scrap. Giagos was doing a great job early closing the distance and managing the range against obviously a much longer guy. He landed real hard on Zellhuber in round 1 and kind of tried to chase him down, but Zellhuber recovered really quickly. And from there, he fought really well. He kept the pressure on Giagos. He was undeterred. His takedown defense was amazing. And then, of course, he hurt Giagos with a right. Giagos shot, and he immediately cinches up the beautiful anaconda. So, yeah, great win for him. He's really bounced back with two nice ones in a row now after the super weird dud in his debut.
All right, in a featherweight bout, Kyle Nelson defeated Fernando Padilla by UD. Mark, staying with you. Take it.
I thought Padilla fought a weird fight here, honestly. He seemed lazy to me. He never cut Nelson off offensively. He was the one coming forward, but he was kind of just following Nelson around the cage. Defensively, it seemed like he wasn't really respecting Nelson, and I think those things kind of combined to cost him the fight. And Nelson always he fights the same, smart, buttoned-up fight where he's going to have the high guard, fire off some straight shots at you, and this fight, that was enough. And maybe the calf kicks were a factor, as Dom said. Maybe Padilla was feeling it, and that's what made him kind of slow. But, disappointing for him as a follow-up after he debuted by, finishing Julian Erosa. So, that sucked for him, and another one for Kyle Nelson, who's kind of clawing his way back after a really rough start to his UFC career.
Okay, Omar.
Yeah, I actually had the same thought. It was frustrating me watching this kid fight, and maybe the calf kicks did have something to do with it, but it seemed like it was more than that, because even his range management, the kid's 6'1". He does not need to be that close to Kyle Nelson to throw a cross, or a jab, or any of that shit. Not once were his hands fully extended out, his arms are fully extended out. Every single punch that he threw was completely smushed in. His elbows were completely bent. There's no power in them. I'm not sure what he was doing in there. It was really frustrating to see, especially having like interest in wanting to have watched him fight and see what he brought to the table. And like I said, he's got skills. He's got the dexterity in his body. Like he can move his body in a way that would be very, very dangerous in a fight. But Jesus, did he not put it together at all?
Even in that fight, he had a moment. He had moments where it was like, why isn't this guy beating Kyle Nelson?
Yeah.
Like you could see the talent that's in there.
Yep.
Okay. In the flyweight division, tough one. Edgar Chairez and Daniel Lacerda's their fight ended in a no contest due to a premature stoppage in round number 1. Mark?
Yeah, this sucked for both guys, obviously. Yeah. And I get it that the arm dropped, okay. But you can't just call it as soon as you see an arm drop. Like, if you think he might be out, then grab the damn arm. See if it's truly limp. Don't just jump right in when you have no idea what's going on. So, yeah, it sucked for both guys. Would have been nice to see who could have gotten the W. Lacerda was on his 5th shot in the UFC despite being 0-4, and he was actually doing all right. So the poor guy might have finally gotten a win, and he didn't even get a chance. So, yeah, it's a tough one.
Omar.
Yeah, if Mike Bell didn't shit the bed this weekend, we might have had something more to say about Chris Taglioni, but I guess we'll leave him alone. We don't got a lot of time for this episode to go through him, but it wasn't a great moment. I think something needs to be done about how these processes work, right? Like even I had the moment when I saw his arms completely go down. I'm not a grappler. I don't pretend to be. So there are things that I know I don't feel, and I don't know how they feel. I know a little bit, but I don't know a ton, right? I don't consider myself a grappler to any extent. But when I saw his arm drop, I was like, oh, he looks fucked. And you're right. He needed to check the arm, not immediately just call the fight off. But there should have been a reaction. Just the one that Chris Taglioni did was the wrong one. A little premature.
Yep. Okay. Charlie Campbell from Long Island, round 1 knockout over Alex Reyes. Yeah, I met Charlie Campbell at Toro. He was cornering his teammate, the quiet man. How's his name? I'm blanking. I announced him. It'll come to me. Omar, go first.
Do I know this person? I feel like I know that nickname.
Mantello.
Which nickname for who?
That's the teammate. Is Mantello.
I don't know him.
Who is Mantello?
Mantello? Yeah, I don't know him.
Quiet man. He fought at Toro, and I met Charlie there as well because he was they corner each other. They both train at. Man, I'm fucking tired. I can't. I'm just brain farting all over the place.
Well, you're fucking up the lightning of the lightning round. I can tell you that.
They both train at the gym. Yeah, they train at the gym together.
They train at the
gym. It was a good fight up until it lasted, man. Charlie Campbell seemed to have his number. That man looked like he throws stones for hands, though, man. He looks like he's got power in that bitch. As good as his striking was, I would love for it to be just a little tighter. There was one of those uppercuts in that fight that reminded me about the Tony Ferguson Gaethje uppercut exchange that was just a goddamn coin flip in the end. He kind of threw one of those, and I was like, oh, you can't be doing that, dude. You can't be doing that past this point, man. You might get away with it in the early fights in your career, but eventually that shit is the shit that'll get you knocked out by an elite fighter. So I think there's a little bit of tightening up that needs to be done, but he looked absolutely fantastic. The knockout was superb. Found Alex Reyes' chin on multiple occasions, and Reyes needs credit too for holding on as long as he did and eating as much as he did, because he should have been out after the first couple, and he wasn't. He definitely kept trying to fight back as long as he could. But fantastic performance from Campbell, and we'll definitely see him back in the octagon soon against, I'm assuming, somebody good.
Ray Longo.
Yeah.
They both train with Ray Longo. Okay.
Yeah.
God damn it.
I had the same exact take watching him fight. I was like, ooh, he got that killer be killed technique. Like,
yeah.
You could just see. But hell of a debut for him, man. He's a fun addition to the lightweight division. He brings the pressure. He's got knockout power. He's a character on top of it. I don't know who he KO'd worse, Alex Reyes in the fight or DC in the interview, dropping the classic rock line on him. But, you can't debut better than that.
It's lucky DC did fucking bottom his ass right in the octagon.
DC got a little mad. He was like, I love a good WWE reference, so I'll let you live right now. Or
yeah. Yeah. DC was definitely ready to give his opinion. Like, oh, he asked. I'm ready. I'm ready with my opinion. And then he was like, shut the fuck up, DC. He's like, well, damn.
Then he was like, shout out to Dwayne Johnson. I'm a fan of his.
Yep.
That was awesome. What a great
It was pretty
debut.
funny. It was funny.
He's a talented striker, man. He's super talented.
Oh no, he's definitely got it. When it comes to the striking, he's definitely got it. Everybody, I think, most people could always use a couple tweaks here and there. So that comment doesn't really mean anything as far as how good or bad or anything like that. I'm just pointing out a specific thing in his actual performance that obviously I think needs to be tightened up. But that kid's got hands for sure. He is a fucking problem.
Yep.
And also, gotta love the alliteration. Charlie the Cannibal Campbell.
Yeah.
Oh, I like it. I
Awesome.
didn't know that. I didn't even hear that. That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
man. All right, women's strawweight division closing us out here. Josephine Knutson defeated Marnik Mann by UD. Omar.
I don't know who Josephine Knutson is, but I'm gonna fucking remember from this day forward because she beat the shit out of this man girl. I don't know who either one of these women are. I didn't know much about them or anything about them before this fight. But Knutson went nuts. Huh?
Nice.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, dude, she went completely off on that girl from the striking to the ground. The striking was sexy. I'm just going to say it. It was sexy. It was at range, at distance, moving her feet in and out, never lost her base. I mean, very few times did her striking lead her into the clinch, I think unnecessarily or unwanted perhaps. But for the most part, she was picking this girl apart from range, man. And it was a beautiful sight to see. I definitely want to see what she's got going forward. So I will definitely have to keep my eye on Josephine Knutson.
I think it was Knutson, unfortunately, for your nuts joke.
Oh, come on. So close.
She's Swedish.
But, yeah. I mean, agree. She looked amazing. I also don't really know what to say about this fight without being mean because I feel like one girl looked like she was UFC caliber and one girl just simply didn't at all.
That's fair.
Man didn't have anything to offer in there. She was just basically a punching bag for Knutson. So
And
unless
tough,
Knutson is
but-
like title contender level already, I just don't think Man has it necessarily. She was tough, agree.
Yeah.
But yeah, super dominant debut for Knutson. Definitely a name to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
And that does it for our lightning round. And for our recaps of Noche UFC in Las Vegas.